war here. What is your take? How is Pakistan playing in this whole balance of powers of sorts?
Ultimately, I think Pakistan is acting insincerely to further its own interests. Look, Pakistan is a terrorist state. It's scared to death that it's going to be held accountable for its terrorism. Traditionally, what Pakistan tries to do is embrace the United States in some sort of diplomatic partnership, pretend that they are actually on the same page as the United States in order to win immunity and also to gain hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars. I wouldn't be surprised to see if that is what Asim Munir is not doing now.
Right. Now, President Trump and the CENTCOM chief have recently declared Pakistan as U.S.'s close ally against tackling international terrorism. But U.S. on the same side has also apparently felicitated Pakistan in getting financial aid from the World Bank and the IMF. How is all this playing out?
Remember that during World War II, Franklin Delano Roosevelt talked about Joseph Stalin as a close ally. This is diplomatic rhetoric. It's not reality. Everyone sees Pakistan for what it is, except perhaps for Donald Trump. So, while Donald Trump and the commander of U.S. Central Command may whisper sweet nothings into Pakistan's ear, it's because they want something from Pakistan. What I'm arguing is that nothing which we could gain from Pakistan is worth the price of having Pakistan as an ally.
Right. Now, you said that the U.S. is seeking some kind of a gain. What is your impression? What could that gain be?
Well, when it comes to President Trump reaching out to Pakistan against the backdrop of the Israel-Iran conflict, what the United States position is now is that Iran needs to surrender its nuclear program completely. On one hand, this could be a Pakistani interest. I lived in Iran shortly after the 1998 Pakistan nuclear tests, and most Iranians at the time thought those tests were directed at Iran itself. Iran and Pakistan are competitors, even if sometimes they find themselves cooperating. So is it in Pakistan's interest for Iran to give up its nuclear program? Yes. President Trump is probably trying to make that case. If it's in Pakistan's own interest, however, we shouldn't pay Pakistan a single dollar for achieving what's in Pakistan's own interest. At the same time, if Iran's nuclear program is going to be eradicated, it may take infiltration of U.S. forces, special forces, and we may be gaining permission for that. If we are going to truck out Iran's nuclear supplies following the conclusion of hostilities, those supplies need to go somewhere. And so perhaps there's some discussion that Pakistan could receive those supplies. Again, what sounds good in a situation room or a foreign ministry boardroom, conference room, doesn't necessarily make sense in reality. There is no way that Pakistan should be paid for cooperation or should be the recipient of any Iranian nuclear enriched material.
Right. Not very often do you see a military chief walking into the White House to meet the president here for a presidential lunch. How do you see all this play out? This is the Republic of Pakistan, but you don't have the prime minister representing Pakistan. In fact, you have the army chief walking in.
Well, first of all, President Trump is enamored with generals. We've known that since his first term. Second of all, it's reality that Asim Munir has more power than the Prime Minister of Pakistan. That's always been the case with the Pakistani military and specifically with the ISI. And so Donald Trump is simply reflecting the reality without the diplomatic polish. But there also may be something more going on here. Remember that after the September 11th attacks, then Deputy Secretary of State Richard Armitage supposedly told Pakistan that if it didn't stop its support for al-Qaeda, that Pakistan could be subject to even a nuclear attack. Dick Armitage subsequently denied making those statements, but everyone knows he actually did threaten Musharraf. Now, the issue becomes, did Donald Trump tell Asim Munir that his actions risk a covert response, which the Pakistanis will not be able to abide, will not like? In effect, is Donald Trump threatening Pakistan in private simply to allow it to save face in public? I wouldn't be surprised if there's some element to that in Donald Trump's decision to meet with Pakistan's army chief rather than with a civilian elected prime minister.
Now, this meeting here today, this lunch meeting here today at the White House, what message is it really putting out or signaling out? And how is China really taking all of this in, considering China is also very close to Pakistan?
Well, perhaps China's chief interest is that much of the oil, at least 44% of it, which comes out through the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz, goes to China and Asia. And therefore, if a conflict continues to disrupt supply through the Strait of Hormuz, China is the big loser there, not the United States, not Israel. And so China does have a direct interest in this conflict quieting down. When it comes to Pakistan itself, however, can you repeat the question? Sorry.
With this meeting happening here at the White House today, how do you see China, what kind of a messaging is going out, and how are the Chinese interpreting this whole thing?
Well, I'll stand with what I said with regard to China. 1, 2, 3. Pakistan is a Chinese proxy, and it would also not surprise me if some messages were being passed not only from Trump to Asim Munir, but if Asim Munir was delivering certain messages to Trump from China at the same time. Pakistan, on one hand, is a terror sponsor. On the other hand, as prickly as Pakistani officials can be about their sovereignty, Pakistan is hardly an independent country anymore. It really is a satrapy, a proxy of China. And so we need to recognize Pakistan in that context as well.
Now, Prime Minister Modi did have a conversation with President Trump earlier, and they did talk about, India's what is India's role here and what is India's concerns when it comes to Pakistan. Do you think Donald Trump would put that out to Asim Munir today?
Certainly, Donald Trump might. The problem with Donald Trump is, number one, he doesn't really have a full sense of history. Number two, he's prone to moral equivalence. And number three, he will put other countries' national security below his own desire to win a Nobel Peace Prize. And hence we have rhetoric before the Munir went in to the White House that Donald Trump had said that Asim Munir, Pakistan, was America's best friend, America's friend, this effusive rhetoric, which really is insincere and has no meaning. If Donald Trump doesn't understand that he needs to shred the moral equivalence and call out who is right and who is wrong, the conflicts in the region, be it between Pakistan and India, or more broadly, with Israel, Iran, and Pakistan, are going to become much worse before they become better.
Right. And finally, your advice to both these three countries, the US, Pakistan, and India. What is your advice to all three countries?
My advice to Pakistan is to cease its terror sponsorship. It can try to take advantage of this world leader or that world leader, but ultimately it's going to pay the price. Indeed, we already see with Pakistan's own internal discord that it's paid a great price. When it comes to India, India should not take, when it comes to India alone is responsible for its national security. It needs to base its national security on reality, not the promises of temporary leaders or insincere partners. Donald Trump may want to pretend that he is the fulcrum of negotiations, but ultimately, the only person who should decide what's good for India are those within India's government and Prime Minister Modi himself. When it comes to the United States, it's important that India recognize Donald Trump alone is not in charge of U.S. policy. The U.S. Congress is. And the U.S. Congress, in a bipartisan manner, embraces India. We are far less willing to let Pakistan's malign and terror sponsoring behavior slide than perhaps the White House is. And therefore, sometimes it's important for India to simply ignore the advice or the commands they're getting from Washington, in much the same way that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ignored the desire of President Trump and put Israel's own national security first and foremost with regard to its security calculations against Iran.
Right. And finally, I'll just take one question just separately altogether. In several ways, you have President Trump trying to convince Iran to let go of its nuclear weapons. And here you have Pakistan, who's publicly come out and said that they support Iran, and if an Islamic nation needs nuclear powers, they can rely on Pakistan. How do you think Donald Trump is going to balance this out?
Well, first of all, Pakistan's position isn't new. We've heard this ever since Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, that if the Jews can have a bomb, if the Christians can have the bomb, then and the Hindus have the bomb, then the Muslims have the bomb. And that's always been Pakistan's mindset for more than 60 years. Will Donald Trump recognize that Pakistan is responsible for the deaths of hundreds of Americans, including on his watch? Ultimately, he will become cognizant of that, even if it has not yet penetrated the Oval Office. Remember, 90% of the explosive precursors which were used in improvised explosive devices inside Afghanistan, came from one of two factories in Pakistan, and the Pakistani government purposely didn't intercept those. There is little mood in Washington for Pakistan's nonsense. And if Pakistan believes that it can fool the United States, then ultimately Asim Munir is going to end up like his Iranian military equivalents. That is either burned to death or in a smoldering crater spread over hundreds of yards.
All right. Thank you so much for talking to ANI, Michael. Appreciate your time.
Anytime.